Martin Lewis, founder of MoneySavingExpert, joins me. Martin, hello. Good to talk to you again.
Hi, Sheila.
Hello, how are you doing? So what stood out for you there?
Well, there's a lot in there. There's a lot in there in two different sections, both what the Chancellor has done, and you've already been talking in some ways about what the Chancellor hasn't done that people wanted him to do. Now, I'll be honest, I'm in somewhat of a quandary in doing this interview with you today because I've got a 15-minute sit-down with the Chancellor for my show tomorrow morning where I'll be putting to him many of the questions, and I'll probably be focusing somewhat on what he hasn't done. And I don't want to keep my powder dry, as the phrase goes, without going too much into that today, because I think it's best left until I can put it to the Chancellor. For me, the obvious big thing. So first of all, there's this thing called fiscal drag, which is his main way of recouping funds in this budget. Fiscal drag is when you freeze thresholds. So thresholds will go up as planned this year, but then from next year until 2026, your tax-free allowance, the amount that you start paying higher rate tax, capital gains tax, inheritance tax, lifetime allowances will all be frozen. And what that means is as inflation and wages grow, more people will pay more tax. Even though there are no tax changes on income tax, more will pay more tax. Let's make this very simple. Currently, you can earn £12,500 a year without paying any tax on it, and you can earn up to £50,000 a year without going into the higher rate tax. If you freeze those and average incomes start to go up, someone earning 12 grand now will in 3 years' time be earning 13 grand, so they'll start paying tax. Someone earning 49 grand now may in 3 years' time be earning £53,000, so £3,000 of their income will be taxed at the higher rate. And that was one of his big ways within consumer finance, which I focus on anyway, of recouping some tax. You've also got the good news here for some is that universal credit, the £20 uplift a week, is to be extended until October. There's a bit of a cliff edge then, which is when unemployment might starting to rise. Something else he didn't mention that's very important, which is for anyone who's self-employed, who is claiming universal credit. There's this rather complicated thing called the minimum income floor. And that has been removed at the moment, and they've said they're going to continue to keep the minimum income floor gone until August. Now, just to try and explain this, I'm going to oversimplify because it's easier to oversimplify and then people will get the concept. What the minimum income floor does is it says that the self-employed effectively, regardless of what they're actually earning, will be assumed to be earning minimum wage for roughly 35 hours a week, and their universal credit will be calculated on that. So when you get rid of it, there's no assumption of minimum earnings, and you actually earn whatever you are earning, which means you'd have a higher eligibility to universal credit if you're struggling at the moment. And that has been kept till August. So those would be the sort of two main levels and income ones I'd focus on.
What stands out for you about the furlough scheme? Because for those receiving it, the employees, I should say, the ones who want to keep their jobs until this madness is over, it obviously will be good news to them. But I was just hearing from one or two business owners, employers, who say that it's still a cost to them because they still pay national insurance, they still have their rent to pay on their business. I mean, I know that's slightly separate from furlough, but it's that they still are losing money in all of this. And that if that weakens their business, it weakens their ability to employ.
Well, look, clearly we know from previous iterations and when we thought we were coming out of this the first time and that we didn't, the more you make employers pay towards furlough, the less people they'll keep on furlough who they're not sure whether they're going to be able to need afterwards. So absolutely, right now employers contribute national insurance and they contribute compulsory pension contributions, but the full wages are paid by the government for those on furlough. From July, employers will then have to pay 10% towards salary. From August, 20% towards. So at that point, if you are a business, at the moment, you've probably got that wriggle room where you can say, look, I'm going to keep people on who I think I'll need. But once you're paying 10 or 20% of the salary, it's a crystallization point to the mind that says, from now on, I'm only keeping people on who I will definitely need. And so we will start to see some unemployment on the back of that increase in furlough. Now, the furlough scheme is far better now than it was at launch. We have flexible furlough. You can be furloughed for half your hours. So if people do have some work, they can work and their employer pays them normal salary during that period. And then for the period of their normal hours they're not working, they can be on furlough. I have some sympathy here, though. The concept is things are returning to normal. Furlough's been extended longer than we thought it would be until September. We're hearing the roadmap is in July, things will mostly be back to normal. So there's a bit of a transition time who need it. And there is a balance between the taxpayer and the employer. In many ways, for me, the bigger issue here is about the self-employment grants, where we've had more change today. The fourth self-employment grant, which I've just read, doesn't look like it's going to be open to applications until late April, which seems a huge delay and a much bigger delay than we've had before. And I suspect, I don't know if someone else has said that on the programme before, but if they haven't, there'll be people listening right now who will really sink back in their chairs and wonder how they're going to last until late April to get that payment. I was assuming it'd be... and this is for money from February. So, it's effectively right at the end of the period. That's a very long time. Now, they tell us that 2019-20 tax returns are going to be taken into account for this fourth grant. I was one of those campaigning for this, so I'm very happy to see it. And I had predicted it would come. We're still not quite sure yet, and I've got all these questions in. I say to you this each year, Sheila, the budget is the tip of the iceberg. It's all the details underneath. Yeah. And so it says 2019-20 will now be taken into account, but will we stretch back 4 years? We're currently looking at the past 3 years of finances when we assess the self-employment grant. Will we just add this for a fourth year, or will we actually get rid of 2016-17 and reassess over 3 years? I'm waiting for confirmation. We've then got the fifth grant coming, due to start in May, be paid in July. The amounts on that are variable depending on your drop in turnover. But I don't yet know. It says if your turnover's dropped more than 30%, but I don't yet know more than 30% compared to what. And we haven't got those details yet. So the devil is in the detail on that one, and that's what we really do need to find out.
And let me ask you about two announcements that relate to house purchasing, stamp duty and that 95% mortgage and the government guaranteeing beyond the 5% that somebody might be able to put towards their deposit. The two are slightly related, aren't they?
They are. What they both do is pump the housing market. Now, there are many people out there, and I look at the response, I've been tweeting this, of how many likes the tweets get, and the extension of stamp duty is one of those big ones. Many people who are looking to complete at the moment were worried they weren't going to get in time due to the delays by the 31st of March, are breathing a huge sigh of relief that they've got time. Remember, stamp duty crystallises at completion, so you have to complete before the deadline to pay the lower stamp duty. What the Chancellor has said is the nil rate band on up to £500,000 will be extended until the end of June, and after that the nil rate band will be on to £250,000 until September, when it reverts to the old you have to start paying stamp duty on property transactions above 125 grand. Now, look, in the short term this is definitely a win. Whether this is a real win, we've seen such house price inflation on the back of the cut in stamp duty that if you do the maths, in the long run, this stamp duty cut might have actually cost those who were definitely going to buy anyway more money than it saved them because of the increase in house prices when you add that to a mortgage. So I'm not so sure this interventionist policy is that helpful for people. It will help some. And the 5% mortgages, so just to explain that, what the government does, and they did this a few years ago, 2011 to 2016, or maybe 2013 to 2016. Do you know what? It doesn't matter. It was a few years ago.
It's gone. There's been a pandemic since.
It doesn't really matter what year it was, exactly. They had a scheme. Well, what the government does is it says to big mortgage lenders, you offer people 5% deposit mortgages or 95% loan to value, technically, and we will guarantee the extra bit of it that you wouldn't offered them. It doesn't, and so you have these mortgages that are underwritten, or an extent of it is underwritten by the government, so they can offer 5% deposit mortgages. Again, sounds good, but what happened last time, and I was relatively critical of it at the time, was people could get 5% mortgages, but the rates were crap. I'm not sure I'm allowed to say that word. The rates were pants. I apologise if I've offended anyone. The rates were pants. And actually, I would constantly push people, if you can, get yourself to 10% when your mortgage rate will be so much lower that the amount that you would pay back in the next couple of years would easily make up for getting the 5% deposit. So, I do wonder whether we're artificially inflating. We're not really helping people. We're helping them on paper in the mortgage market, but this interventionist approach is actually encouraging people to get properties when they can't yet afford it and to stretch their finances in a way they shouldn't. The truth is probably somewhere in between the two, that we're helping and we're not helping.
And just, what's you're speaking to the Chancellor tomorrow, as is Nick Ferraro and LBC. Two of us can play that game, Martin. What's your overall sense of the success of this from Rishi Sunak's perspective as a budget?
It was very interesting at the end of the budget, and I will be listening. What time's Nick doing it? I shall have a listen before I interview the Chancellor in case Nick lands a good blow. I'll nick it. I'll nick Nick. What's my? It was very interesting. If you watch the end of the budget, he did a sort of peroration at the end, a big lauding speech, which was almost a think piece about what we have to do to Britain and the economy and bringing us back and looking at the future of Britain. And it is very much an extensive remit of a Chancellor is keen to be seen in control, both of the finances, but also impacting the rest of society. And then you had Keir Starmer in the House saying, it's good to be sitting across from somebody who's actually making decisions. Now, whether the Chancellor himself is actually trying to position himself as a future Prime Minister, or whether it's a nice, easy narrative from the papers. Interestingly, when I got this interview, and I know Nick's got one as well, we're on LBC, should be careful. When I got this interview with the Chancellor, because unlike Nick, I'm not in the normal range of political interviewees that you would do on the back of the budget. Quite a number of the newspapers have written that up as Rishi's attempt to put himself in the prime ministerial seat by appealing to mainstream Middle Britain on an ITV 8:30 programme tomorrow night. But actually, interestingly, the argument is we've been on the show campaigning for him to do this for weeks with thousands of people tweeting him. So it's been a hard negotiation and debate to get him on the show. So I'm not sure it's all quite as calculated and manipulated as people seem to think it is. Clearly, he wants to position himself as being the greatest Chancellor since sliced bread. Whether he is or isn't or not is something we'll know in 5 to 10 years' time. Or that certainly there are many of those excluded you've spoken to right now
who won't feel that way.
Yeah, I was going to say something bad about slicing. No, I mean the thing that sticks in the craw, as he said, we are doing everything for every people, every business. We will do whatever it takes. Well, we know that's not true. He has not done whatever it takes. There are many excluded out there who've been left by the wayside.
Final quick word. Did we get confirmation that the contactless limit on cards will be pushed up to £100? Did we get that?
Yeah, that was one of those pre-announced just before. The contactless limit on cards is now £100. It's gone up today. Whether it won't actually change because it has to be implemented over the next few weeks. So it's gone up from the 40 quid to £100. Of course, if you're on a phone and you're paying contactless by your phone, it's unlimited anyway. My view on that is quite simple. I have no problem with the £100 contactless limit. For me personally, I actually would enjoy it. But for many people who would never carry 100 quid of cash in their pocket, and that's what contactless is equivalent to, who I think should be allowed to set their own limit and set a lower limit. And in this modern tech age, surely it is not beyond wit and wisdom that we can all have a contactless limit that we self-define up to the maximum £100 rather than everybody having the maximum £100.
Well, certainly with online banking, you'd think that isn't beyond the wit of man, wouldn't you? Thanks very much indeed, Martin. Great to talk to you again. Martin Lewis, founder of MoneySavingExpert.